Thank you, everyone. I know it's been a long day, but very excited to be here. And one of the things that I often talk about is digital identity and blockchain. I spent all my life of my professional career previously in identity. So identity of literally everything: identity of people, identity of things, identity of trees, of cows, all sorts of things, you know. I was the former program advisor to the World Economic Forum for 5 years on digital identity. And when I first brought up the idea of, well, you need identity for things like cows, for environment stuff, a lot of people had the same reaction. They laughed. Well, actually, that's becoming a reality when you look at supply chain, when you look at sustainability and other things. So why do we even think about digital identity? Well, many, here in the EU, as you can tell, I'm from UK, so sorry, Brexit. But in the EU, there's a concept of carrying an identity in most countries. And in some countries where I'm from, we don't carry identities. So there are a lot of differences, but identity is fundamentally used all day, all the time, in a lot of the high trust transactions that we have, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's opening a bank account, whether it's getting a job, getting education, getting benefits, so on and so forth. And as we go more into AI, now the hot topic, and IoT devices, identity becomes more important. Well, how do we know that my fridge is buying the right thing? It is really my fridge with my permission to buy the right thing. My car ordering a part because it really needs it, that I authorized that transaction or I didn't. So all of those things really matter. And with identity, with AI, and AI getting increasingly clever, how do they know it's really me? In my previous role, I came from consulting. I was Accenture, leading up the Decentralized ID and Biometrics practice. With deep fakes, how do you even know that's really me? Or is it my deep fake pretending to be me? Because it might fool facial recognition. It might not. And all of those kind of things are going to be really, technology needs to get ahead to start thinking about how do we implement things properly. As part of this is all published online. Why, importance of identity is really, it's got to be useful. People think about privacy, security, of course, it's very, very important. It needs to be fit for purpose. And one thing that I always say, we need to offer choice. Some people want to share a lot of information. Some people don't. Different culture have different level of what is acceptable in level of data sharing. And different people, a lot of technical folks may not be comfortable with sharing a lot of their information. But a lot of people who are maybe, influencers on social media want to share as much information as possible, at least what they want to share, not what necessarily they don't want you to see. So the aspects of choice, even for them, is very, very important. What is inclusive? I'll tell you a story. I lived in the US for a few years. For 7 years, I was an Accenture managing director then. I've tried to open a bank account. I lived in Houston. I moved from London to Houston. Same bank from UK to US. Been banking with that place for good 20 years at that point. Yeah, 20 plus years probably. Couldn't open a bank account. So I lived in Houston for the first few years. Couldn't go open a bank account. I'm on long-term medication my whole life. I have Asperger's. Can't get a prescription. So I'm a nervous wreck as a result, because I'm like, wired and not able to get my prescription. Can't open a bank account. I need to be paid in the UK and transfer the money over. Thank God that at that time, sterling was still very high in comparison to dollar. So very lucky. But after a while, I couldn't get paid, couldn't get a prescription, couldn't get a car. If you live in Texas, for those that have been to Texas, you cannot not get a car. Where are you going to walk to? You get, it's dangerous. You can't walk. So, and this is a person who heads up the identity department in a large global organization. I'm relatively well paid, relatively well educated. If it's difficult for me, what is it like for everybody else? And I can read, I can write, I'm hopefully computer savvy. And what does that mean for those that actually don't have that level of access, don't have that level of education, can't go and look at every single website about how to do multiple bank accounts in multiple places? It must be so much harder for them. So do they do when they need to open a bank account? What do they do when they need to get a mortgage, when they need to get employment? Have you tried looking for a new job, how many forms you have to fill in? My degree hasn't changed for the last 25 years. I don't think it's going to change in the next 25 years either. So all of those static data that you can share, it's also part of your identity, that it needs to be easier. They shouldn't have to call Betty from the admissions department in my university, who only works 1 day a week, and she has 300 applications of requests for identity verification to do with. She has better things to do, I'm sure, like admitting new pupils rather than the people who are 50 years old. Who has requested this multiple times. And it's a pain for us, it's a pain for, as an end user, it's a pain for her, I'm sure. It's a pain for the employee because they're waiting. So it's a cost to society, it's a cost to everybody. So this is why I think there's got to be a better way. We still, in identity, still use pieces of paper. At times when you need to buy a house, need to do different things, you need notary. People have to stamp the thing. To many of the younger folks here, have they even heard of what a notary public is? So it's those kind of concepts. It's fundamentally what we have today is incompatible with the digital world. And these paper-based systems, I don't even carry really a bag. I have cards in my phone. Everything is done on the phone. So get with the program, governments and organizations and educational institutions, because that's how it needs to become. It's inefficient. It's expensive. It's repetitive. I don't want to fill in any more forms. I'm sure you don't either. And those regulatory requirements are finally coming in, like EIDAS 2.0. Many governments, especially EU leading the way, really changing and making this more efficient. Probably heard many people like me complaining about it for a while, and it's cost them a lot of money. You have heard many of the sort of passport issuing processing for through airports. Half of it is actually just fiddling, getting your passport out, giving it to them, putting it back in again, lost it, look for it. All of these kind of things can be avoided if it's digital and shared in advance. Trusted, verifiable data in advance, that you know where the data come from. So many governments are already on this journey, I'm glad to say. And as we move into the Web3 world, it's even more important because it's about data ownership, data sovereignty. I should be able to manage what I want to share about me. None of you need to know my weight. None of you need to know where I live. But if I were to go and say, right, I have some allergies, I need to share it in advance with the caterer. All they need to know is I'm allergic to whatever I'm allergic to. And they don't need to know all the other data about me. So that aspect of selective disclosure is very important. And enabling that trust in the digital world. How do you know it's me? You saw my picture, you saw my LinkedIn, but how do you know? In a pure digital environment, it's very hard to verify who you truly are. In my previous role, we have people who turn up to a job. It's not really who they are. Pictures look very similar, but when they show up, are they really them? And it's very hard to tell. So, and after the pandemic, with less face-to-face, more hybrid interaction, those kind of trust is getting more and more important. So there's got to be a simpler way also. To manage data, to keep data up to date, to guard our privacy for those that want it, and for those that don't want it. But what you say, what's the role in blockchain? Why is it even relevant? Well, actually, it is a fundamental infrastructure that can facilitate this trust. The trust aspects is, well, today, when I cross border, the government, the EU government, Polish government trusts that the UK government said my name is really Christine Leong. It could be Mickey Mouse. But it's up to they trust, that trust is between the UK government and the EU government, that they have done the due diligence that the holder of this credential is really who they say they are. And that trust layer means that there could be one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship. In a blockchain environment, it's a multi-to-multi relationship without establishing that direct connectivity from one to the other. You can trust a neutral infrastructure with the appropriate governance, like blockchain, to say, this is a trusted entity that has said she is Mickey Mouse, and therefore, this coder of the document is really Mickey Mouse, and this is said by the British government, and they can check. And that infrastructure today with passport is not open to any other entity. It's hard to use. Some is becoming more open. But imagine the government having pings all day long for millions of users. It's not scalable either for them. So thinking of why blockchain is important is precisely that. It enables that capability to go from one to many, to many to many, without building that direct interaction. I don't have to have legal agreements with you, and each and every single one of you to share my data. If so long as you agree to that ecosystem, it's much easier to share. So from Web 2 to Web 3, think of it today. This is how it is. We share our data with companies. Companies own our data. Our identities are determined by them. How many passwords do you each have? How many accounts do you each have? I used to work in InfoSec. Yeah. I couldn't keep up with my own passwords. And the fact that I used to have to build this for my clients. And that world needs to become this. It needs to be user-centric. It needs to be about how I want to interact with the content providers, with the platforms, with the applications, with the organization. It shouldn't be about how they want to use my data. It's my data, right? When I go into, one of my pet peeves is I go into a pharmacy. I have to repeat, every single time, repeat my address, my date of birth, what prescription I'm collecting. Do I need the rest of the pharmacy to know where I live, how old I am, and what diseases I have? Really, no need. I'm sure no one else wants to know. But imagine for people who are vulnerable, people who follow them, people who might be public figures, then they know everything about you. Why should they? So that aspects of being able to share data in advance, being able to share trusted data is the most important, and how you then interact with each of this organization. So how does this SSI, so blockchain ID, basically self-sovereign identity, there are a couple of different terms in the industry used. How does this actually work? Blockchain, in this instance for identity, is very, very, very different than how, let's say, asset. I'm sure many of you have heard today, how crypto assets, blockchain-based assets, how they work. The identity is very different. We actually use the blockchain as almost like a decentralized public key infrastructure. And it's about using it as a directory. So let's say, using my cross-border example, or the university example here, my university and my government issued me with a university certificate that I have my degree. UK government said I'm Mickey Mouse. And each of that bits of data is signed by their private key. And the credentials is given to me. They have a copy. I have a copy, much like what it is today. But their public address, their public DIDs, their decentralized ID identifiers, is actually on the blockchain. And therefore, whenever anyone wants to check, I want to share in advance that I'm coming here, or maybe I'm visiting government, and they want to see, right, does she really have the right credentials? Is she really who she says she is? They don't have to call up my university. They don't have to look at and check the existing PKI, the government's PKI, to see, because it's not accessible, to see whether I'm really who I say I am. They can check the blockchain and say, yep, this signature matches, because it's public-private key match. And there we are. And this can be done in advance, in your own home, while you're still sitting there. And that means that I don't have to go through things like airport control. I don't have to have long queues. Again, Brexited situation, where we now have to queue. Imagine we can all use the biometric aids to go through that quickly, so that you don't have to queue. Wherever you go, your data can be shared in advance so you can walk through. Think of how much better that will be when you get to a place, when you get to long queues, and all of that can be much more automated and much more secure. So a little bit of what nChain's view of the next generation and next iteration of identity has got to be user-centric. Today, that authentication I already mentioned is a big pain. Regulation is all moving towards privacy. And one of the things that I always say is, at many previous events of talking about identity, is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know in the future. When India, Aadhaar, one of the largest identity system and biometric system in the world, when they first built it, they didn't expect privacy regulations to come. So when privacy regulations challenges, cybersecurity challenges came, they didn't have the right regulations in place. And there was an uproar, quite rightly so. But regulations will change. So doing things the right way with blockchain, remember, data goes in, never goes back out. So whatever things that you don't want to go in there, don't put it in there. Think about the unintended consequences of what you do with that data, what could impact in the future. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but then be careful about how you architect. Think about moving a lot of the application capabilities up for a high level, so that you have that level of flexibility, and also dedicating it to different regions, because different countries will have their different regulations, will have different use cases. So how do you architect the right solutions is very important, giving that level of flexibility without having to recode everything all the time. And with the end users, lack of able to consent, I already mentioned by a very charming example of my prescription. And moving forward, thinking of the aspects of this costs companies a lot of money. If everyone has to build an identity system, which they are today, think of how much repetition there is. The cybersecurity costs, the encryption costs for that data, user access management costs for that data. It's not cheap. And thinking through what we think the future would need to look like, standardization, a huge advocate of getting the right standards. The tech can look different. We're a number of different service providers here, number of different techies here. Doesn't all have to look the same, but we all need to make it work together. And there are multiple ways to do something. And by having standards, by advocating for standards, coming together to say, this is all acceptable communally to all of us and the governments, then that's the way to really go about it. And we need to think of the way of, at least in nChain's perspective, the fast digital adoption of society. The world is changing. Whether we like it or not, it's going to be more digital. But more digital doesn't mean a worse experience, doesn't mean slower, doesn't mean more fidgety, doesn't mean less secure. All of those have to be assumed. And the fact is, it's got to be more trusted. How do we make things more trusted without making it worse? So all of that aspects, I think technology like blockchain, which is very much a back-end technology. If you ever look at visualization of blockchain, it's really very boring. It's just blocks. I really, when I started, I thought, you got to be kidding me, right? This is not very, how do I show this to my client? How do I sell this? So really, that front end, that user experience design, the UI, the engagement, the use cases, it's really important, because I don't care what technology is in the background if I'm an end user, it just needs to work. So that aspects of thinking through the future and how to support users, very important. And the full stack of the team and how do you go into development, also at the heart of what we do today at nChain. Thinking of our way into Web3, it's about the empowerment of the individual. If I'm able to say, my other big passion is dogs. If I can go and sell really healthy dog foods, I want to be able to have personalized things for each of the animals. Then how do I do that? And how do I build the direct engagement to each of those entities, each of the owners? How do I enable them to have their data and share the right data with each individual caretaker that they have? And that aspect is sort of Web3 identity. And as I said, it doesn't only apply to human. In fact, I did a patent on animal health records and how do you share medical data for pets and for cows or livestock or whatever it is, as well as identity of cars, of fridges, of those kind of things, and having that better accountability in the future. And of course, signing, an easy use case is signing documents. Yes, we have PDFs, DocuSign, all of those are great things. But how do you check? That certificate function is often very clunky. No one really understands what it is. So how do organizations share data, check data, make sure it's much easier, and that I don't have to share my identity. I'm just sharing that this came from a trusted, verifiable source. Lots of use cases around this, and mentioned a few already around things like employment. Businesses, people often think this is purely an individual problem, like crossing borders. One of the examples I always give is the passport is invented for cross-border travel. Today, you use it for a lot more things than cross-border travel, including registering a company, including getting a mortgage, including many, many other things, right? Getting into my hotel every single time. So all of that kind of thing. Think of the supply chain management aspect and identity of companies, identity of vehicles. So as we go into driverless car and so on, how do you share data of that aspects of identity becomes more important? Ownership of an asset. One of the many things that the blockchain and crypto world is evolving is putting identity with assets, so that there's a way of linking, or way of not linking, if that's so desired. But currently, today, most of the blockchains out there don't support both. It's one or the other. So that's something that nChain is working on and building towards a better way of having identity with assets, with supply chain. All of that can be done together, so that you don't have to have multiple chains. Imagine that nightmare when you have to support it. Many other different use cases that you can all imagine. And what we sort of look at as we go into the future, of course, we are an IP-based organization in the past, and as we move forward, thinking of that aspects of how can we use our differentiated IP into what is Web3 identity, and how do we sign for documents. Those are some of the first things that we're rolling out this year. And what outcomes do we want? I'm an end user. Each and every single one of you is an end user of many, many, many different identities. None of us want multiple apps, multiple wallets. I have a hard enough time managing one wallet. Never mind the multiple. I have to do the identity one with a different crypto one with a different something else. It's unmanageable. And remember that we had sort of during COVID, there was health testing, all of this kind of vaccine certificate, all of that together. Imagine, no one wants this many. So ability to work together, building that ecosystem together so that we can all come towards the standards and a platform that can work together. Because it's a little bit like the sort of CD, VHS versus, and probably too old for most of you, but the VHS versus, the other, whatever the other thing was. And that aspects of what technology wins is because people come together and have standards. And that robust sort of way of working and coming towards the right outcome is what people need the industry, and nChain as part of the industry is focused on delivering. And our platform, we assume security, we assume privacy. Privacy is by design. I'm very much a firm believer in how we do that. And also permissioning, seamless onboarding. Passport is only trusted because it's easy. If people make it difficult, no one will use it. And this was demonstrated by the UK government, gov.uk, when they did identity several years ago. Didn't work. Why? It was too difficult. And the other thing is, no organization has accepted it. You can issue it. It's like bringing your Visa card, MasterCard. When you go out, if your MasterCard isn't accepted everywhere, why do you take it out? Why do you bring it with you at all? It's not then it's not usable. So that aspects of acceptance. So it's not just about issuing those identity. Organizations need to change and prepare to accept those identity, whether they are little dumb identities that are very relatively small, like certificates in IoT devices, in car parts, in components, or whether it's bigger things that have more selective data disclosure, more application capability, like a human digital identity or a company identity with delegation, with custodianship. Those are lots of things to think about. So it's not going to be one size fits all. It's going to be many different ways of doing many things. And for us, that aspects of seamlessness, end user value, and the aspects of interoperability, and and looking at the wider market of how this can facilitate the fundamental infrastructure capability of Web3 is where we are focused on going forward. So looking forward to the panel after this, but lots. I'm going to be around later on, so anyone who have any questions on identity, I can probably talk about that for the next millennium. So thank you very much, everyone.
I would like to ask you, Christine, if you are open to any questions right now on the stage,
sure.
If there are any.
Oh, thank you. Fascinating lecture. Thank you very much. How do you compare your solution to Sovereign Network, which is actually in SSI business for many, many years? Mm-hmm. I'm one of your stewards, and I know them intimately. So what's the difference? So I have two questions, another one.
Sounds good. I'm a good friend of Drummond Reed.
Oh, really?
Actually, I know Drummond for many, many years. So Sovereign, in the days I've founded a lot of the trust over IP when I was in our Accenture days with Drummond and with other folks in the ecosystem. So I do think that the world is changing. I do think it's a great model. We are also on the W3C path. So I think that aspects of interoperability is very important.
Is there any interoperability between nChain SSI and sovereign SSI? I mean,
Not yet, but we'll be based off the same standard.
Okay.
Yeah, it will be based off the same emerging standard that is W3C.
yes.
Yeah.
Second question is, I saw some mentions of cryptography. I assume it's classical cryptography, still symmetric, asymmetric, and all sorts of cryptography. Now, as you know, it is a time to go for post-quantum and quantum cryptographies, and even if some people don't believe in these quantum computers breaking these codes, there is the action of US government very strong, no question about that, NIST and whatnot. How do you refer to that? What are you going to do? Because identity without security on that level is worse than nothing, okay? As you know, right?
Yes. I think this is something that many people, we have, I think, 15 people with PhDs in cryptography alone, focusing on, well, one of the many issues is looking at how the quantum then affect the future. Because as you quite rightly pointed out, identity or anything that has sensitive data, that aspects of post-quantum computing, what does that mean for being able to sort of hack into things, being able to break the encryption? And that's why I said earlier on, what you put in, you've got to be careful. So our philosophy at nChain, we never ever hash PII on chain. So we're very, very much based on W3C DID model that is designed in the trust over IP kind of way, so that at least for now, in what we see as the immediate future, that is still safe. Of course, things will change. What you don't know what you don't know in the future. So as we go forward, I think as we evolve many things, there will be we will use many of our patterns, which are very, very cryptography based, to alleviate some of those concerns. We do sort of the multi-threshold signature and all of these kinds of different techniques to mitigate some of these concerns. But of course, it depends on how things evolve and as the market evolves.